I think a minimal UI can improve storytelling and empathy. A gamer gave this feedback in a study out of the University of Umeå in Sweden. The thesis was attempting to unravel feelings of immersion in relation with UI in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Ghost Recon Wildlands, and Dead Space 3. The research was trying to tackle the role of the HUD in video games, and a HUD is short for heads-up display, the stuff a player sees on screen when they play a video game. While we think video games are all about playing a game, and they are, make no mistake, they also have a lot to do about the presentation of information. Let's take Apex Legends, for example, a first-person multiplayer battle royale shooter. Look at all of this information. If we want to talk about why games can be so overwhelming or difficult or inaccessible or whatever, just look at the amount of information displayed on this screen. We have a minimap, a countdown timer, the information about my own health and shields, and then my teammates' health and shields. We have my healing equipment, my hero's ability, and then my hero's special ability, a compass with the current bearing highlighted, the amount of crafting materials I have, the number of squads that are still on the map, my grenade loadout, my ammo, my gun with attachments, and then the location of one of my teammates on the screen, and then an indicator as to where my other teammate is. We could break this down further if we wanted to. There is a crap ton of information presented here. If we compare Apex Legends to a game like Hunt Showdown, there's a considerable difference. One is not better than the other though, because information in its presentation is not something separate from a game. Rather, the user information or UI, or user experience UX, is a part of the game and the gameplay experience itself. To someone who's been playing games for many decades, Apex Legends does not really deviate from the norm of multiplayer shooters or team-based arena games. But there is a reason why the designers of Hunt Showdown chose not to present information in the same way as Apex Legends. There easily could have been a lot of these kind of elements presented there, so why did they choose not to? This takes us back to the role of the HUD and the role of user experience altogether. As one of my friends said to me, UX is largely two ideas. What is the user trying to achieve, and what information do they need to know to achieve that? But in gaming terms, it's more like, what is a gamer trying to do in a game, and what information do they need on screen to accomplish that? Many discussions on UX in video games eventually always circles back to the HUD and the role of the HUD. It's probably the most kind of digestible and easy to understand element of UX in video games. That's what the study out of Umeå was tackling, and one of the big conversations in gaming UX is the diegetic versus non-diegetic HUD. A non-diegetic HUD is where the information is neither in the game's fiction nor part of the 3D world. If we go back to Apex, think of your cooldown timer. It's not in the game's fiction, it's not in the 3D space of the game, it's just this 2D static icon that's just on your player HUD. Diegetic information is stuff that exists both in the game world and the game's fiction. This ammo indicator on the back of your rifle, for example, in Apex. The physical screen exists in the world of Apex Legend, like your character is holding that gun that displays that information. It is a part of the fiction and a part of the 3D space. This is different from spatial information, which is stuff in the 3D space but not in the fiction of the world, like the nameplate over my teammate. There's also meta HUD information, but I'm just going to link some videos below if you want to get into this 4-part conversation on HUD stuff, if you really want to dig deeper. The big thing though, and the big thing that we want to talk about here, is that gamers rock their socks off about this difference between diegetic versus non-diegetic HUD. The classic example is now Dead Space, but my personal preference is your air canister timer in Metro. The amount of available air you have in your gas mask is known to both Artyom and to you. Why this is important rather than a timer simply displayed on the HUD is because it breaks down the screen. It kind of eliminates that piece of glass that divides the gamer from the character or the experience. In other words, it kind of helps us get immersed, and it helps increase our immersion, which, you know, if we can go on immersion, but it's another way of connecting the gamer to the player and getting them invested and getting them involved and making them care about things that are going on and having overall typically a better game experience. When I play Metro and glance down, Artyom is kind of like also glancing down at this timer. We share the same sense of time, the same panic when our seconds are running out, the same sense of relief when we find a new canister of air. I would not really have these emotions, or at least as strongly, if the watch was replaced with a purely non-diegetic countdown. So when we turn back to those questions asked by my friend, let's use Metro as an example. What is the gamer trying to do in Metro? Well, survive. Get to the next objective, traverse the nuclear wasteland. Okay, they can't travel without getting radiation poisoning. Makes sense in the game's fiction. Okay, so they need a gas mask. Great, gas mask. Traverse the nuclear wasteland to be a proper ranger and to save humanity. Awesome, thumbs up all around. What information do they need as a player? Well, air isn't infinite. Why not? Because we want this to be an atmospheric and immersive and intense game. Okay, so atmosphere is a part of the game. Yes. Okay, so air isn't infinite. So they need canisters? Yeah, I guess so. Okay, bam. Timer. There we go. Wait, that's not immersive. Okay. Let's just put it as a flashing kind of green light that happens when you're low on air. Yeah, but that's not very readable. What's that? Well, it's confusing for gamers. Like, who cares? I thought we're intense here. Sidebar. Here's an important kind of subpoint on the idea of UI as we go on this journey between fictional Ukrainian game devs. Games are games, and UI needs to make games fun. Ever play a game with horrible UI? Yeah, me too. Ever wish it wasn't horrible? All the frickin' time. Does horrible UI make you ever stop playing? Yes, absolutely. So it has to be readable. And let's get back to it. Who cares? Well, they might get frustrated and stop if they don't know how much air they have left in their canister. It's needlessly difficult. Okay, so why not just a timer at the middle of bottom of the screen? Because that's not very immersive, man. Well, why not? Because it's not diegetic. Well, what about a watch? A watch. Bingo, bango, bongo. Boom. The watch timer is diegetic, which checks Metro's atmospheric objective. It shows the player the information they need, which helps them make decisions. It's readable so the player isn't confused, and it's only what they need. You don't need all of these flashing lights, you just need a timer, so the UI feels natural and cohesive. I'm no expert, but I think this is solid user experience. And so often, diegetic UI is often coupled with minimal UI. But there are examples when UI minimalism can function without the need to be diegetic. Hunt Showdown is a good example. You get closer to the Louisiana Bayou by having less on screen. If Crytek crowded this HUD, the horror and atmosphere and experience would be entirely different. Diegetic UI and minimal UI are often universally praised and lauded by gamers. We, to be frank, love this shit. It's why the Swedish study had the response the way it did. Dead Space 3 and Odyssey with a minimal HUD were the most immersive experiences out of the spectrum of scenarios. But what's this empathy nonsense? I could not play Assassin's Creed Odyssey with the standard or normal HUD option. It made me not want to play the game. In a single-player action-adventure, I didn't need the same vomit of information that I do when I play a competitive game like Apex Legends. Yet, the default setting from Ubisoft made the user experience of the game feel very similar, very overwhelming, very gamey. It pulled me right out of the experience. It felt like I was just partaking in an endless list of errands. It never felt like I got a chance to kind of take a breather, take a beat, and take it all in. Take this world in, the story in, the characters in. The screen was crowded, numbers were flashing, Icaros felt pointless, the map felt pointless, because quest markers just made it all feel like a big linear corridor. But then I turned the HUD to the light option and tweaked it a bit further, and suddenly the game went from looking like this to looking like this. And this is where that gamer's comment about empathy really resonates. Like in Metro and the player's relationship to Artyom, I had a stronger relationship with Cassandra and Icaros when I broke down the HUD to be as minimal as I needed. I felt more engrossed with the world, engaged with the story, and excited by the mechanics. Icaros became very important, and I cared for him a lot now. The world felt more alive, and Cassandra felt more relatable. I was definitely more empathetic. But not all games can do this, and not all games really need to do this. You can't play Age of Empires really without a HUD. Apex would be almost impossible, but even if we turned to other single-player open-world RPGs, The Witcher 3 is a lot harder to play with this UI minimalism in mind. And this is where we have to debunk the whole conversation now about UI, diegetic HUDs, and user experience. Because of what I said early on, UI is a part of the game itself. You have to kind of design the game with this idea of UX empathy in mind. Icaros as a mechanic lets Odyssey function without much of a HUD, but Geralt doesn't really have any kind of equivalent. Witcher 3 still had me feeling empathetic, like make no mistake, but this wasn't because of the UI, and turning to minimal UI settings just made the game clunkier to play. It was less readable and more of an owner immersive experience. CD Projekt didn't support this UI minimalism because it's clear that it really wasn't built that way, which makes user experience an indivisible facet of the game. And while new games in this next generation are certainly going to have more options for HUD customization, they'll mean nothing unless games are built with that objective in mind. It can't be a tacked-on feature or a last-minute setting. Undoubtedly, UI minimalism or diegetic UI improves empathy, absolutely, which is something I'm all about. Like, give me those feels, man. But as my friend said, UI is such a foundational component. Some games are defined by their user experience. But it's because those games were designed with immersiveness and empathy together as a part of the game. So I hope we see more of this in the future, because honestly, we can never have enough empathy. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I'd love to know what games you've played that had UI or UX that really made an impression on you, or that you wish were in other games, or tell me your UX horror stories so we can all lament together. Don't hesitate to leave a comment or ask a question. I love having conversations and discussions. It's the most rewarding part of doing all of this. So yeah, I'll catch you guys on the next one.